Picture this. It's the 13th of September 2011, and you work as a game developer for Bandai Namco. With such a repertoire of amazing titles under your studio's belt, your next game, the hotly anticipated Tekken Tag Tournament 2, is sure to be a massive success. It has a giant character roster, awesome graphics, killer combos, and a wicked soundtrack, so this should blow Tekken 6 out of the water, right? After many countless nights of despair and uncertainty brought about by Tag 2's commercial failure, you head home and try to numb the pain the only way you know how. But in your darkest moments, an unexpected revelation is about to take place, and it comes from the boss.
Shh. Ladies, gentlemen, Dig Dug, I'm gonna level with you. Tekken Tag 2 didn't sell very well, and I need to avoid losing my job or else my wife will divorce me and take the couch. So does anyone have any ideas to get us back on track? That's not a bad idea, but it's not fresh enough. We need to cut costs while also delivering something new.
How about we make a new Tekken, where every move tracks and defensive plays kick to the curb?
You're getting a promotion. But seriously guys, does anyone have any ideas about how to bring a revolution to the Tekken series? Can anyone think of how we're going to revolutionize the series? A Tekken Revolution, as it were?
Wait, I've got it. Tekken 4 at Evo.
Released in 2013 as a PS3 exclusive, Tekken Revolution is meant to represent the authentic arcade experience of playing fighting games, minus the assault. After Tag 2's failure, Namco needed to scramble to somehow recoup their costs, and they settled on a free-to-play spin-off. Even though I've been a big Tekken fan for over a decade, I never got to play this entry, and I don't really know much about it as a result. Unfortunately, Tekken Revolution was shut down ages ago, meaning that it's impossible to play on actual hardware, although you can play training mode on a PS3 emulator, but this gets old pretty quickly since you can't actually play with other people. Okay, with the business meeting out of the way, let's get into the history of Tekken Revolution. Unlike the mainline entries into the series, detailed information explaining the development of Tekken Revolution is scarcer than water in the desert, so for now, let's go into more detail regarding the justification for this title's existence. As I mentioned before, Bandai Namco really weren't happy with Tekken Tag Tournament 2's sales figures despite the game selling over 1 million copies. In a graph from 2025 that hilariously features Harada's face in the top right corner, we can see that Tag 2 is the worst selling game in the series by far, selling millions less than Tekken 4, a game which was only released on one platform and was hated by the diehard fans. What makes a sales figure like this sting even more is that Tag 2 released on 3 platforms and it had a staggering amount of content. There are simply too many characters, stages, modes, music, etc. to count in this game, and developing it all couldn't have been easy. To make the deal even better, all the DLC characters for this game were completely free too, so it's safe to say that Tag 2 was, and arguably still is, the ultimate Tekken game in terms of fan service. So, after it flopped, the Tekken team went back to the drawing board, and they had to figure out a way to recoup their losses, and here's where Revolution comes in. According to the gaming database website, Namco pitched the idea of a free-to-play Tekken game to both Sony and Microsoft in 2012, and while Sony liked the idea, Microsoft wasn't too keen about it, which explains why Revolution is a PS3 exclusive despite Tag 2 being multi-platform. As a side note, I wasn't able to find the original source of this information, so even though it makes perfect sense, let's just take it with a grain of salt. In 2013, Polygon published an interview with Harada regarding why Tekken was going down the free-to-play route, and he revealed the following. There are several reasons. One of them is that fighting games are now a pretty mature genre, and one that's becoming difficult for people to approach. We figured that if it was cheaper to get into, more people would buy it, and we'd have a bigger base of competitors. Then we figured we might as well go all the way and make it free. If we took fighters, this over-mature, very hardcore-oriented genre, and had it so a wider audience gave it another shot, we'd figure that it'd connect it to the next stage. The title was announced at E3 2013, but Harada stated that development had actually finished before the event, and they kept the game a secret until its big announcement that year. One of the new additions to Revolution was Eliza, the then brand new Lady Vampire character, and it was stated that, well, since Revolution was a non-canon spin-off, the development team felt free to experiment with wacky character concepts that wouldn't fit within the story of the mainline entries. The developers even went as far as to release an online poll that asked fans to choose which scrapped character concept they'd like to see become a reality, and some of these are pretty out there. From a gender-swapped version of Paul similar to Terry and SNK heroines, a female sumo wrestler who idolizes Ganryu, to a salmon that literally can't attack due to it being a fish, I would personally love to see one of these show up in Tekken 8 onwards. Perhaps the most fascinating component of this poll is the reasoning behind why these ideas never made the final cut in previous games. The girl sumo was cut to not overshine Ganryu, girl Paul was cut because the idea was just too crazy even for Tekken standards, and the salmon was cut because, well, he can't fight. Other characters include a zombie bride, Shin Kamiya from the Tekken Blood Vengeance movie, and a quote-unquote sexy female Tekken Force character. Apparently, this idea goes all the way back to Tekken 5, but her outfit had the team concerned about an increase in the series' age rating, so she was scrapped. Moving on, Tekken Revolution requires you to use virtual tokens to play matches, and you had to purchase these with real money. I'll cover this system in more detail later on, but according to Harada, we looked at Team Fortress 2 and some of the other free-to-play titles that are popular in North America. I'm a PC gamer and experienced some of these firsthand, but it was kind of tough to settle on, because no one's really done that with a fighting game before. Whether our approach is a good one or not is still hard to tell. We are adapting to what people are asking for as we go along, and it's an ongoing process. Harada also explained that due to his love for PC gaming and Revolution's free-to-play model, the development team were actively looking into porting the title to PC. That's something we would really love to do actually, and it's been brought up several times, but Tekken is different from a lot of other games recently because they develop on PC and port to PS3. For us, even from the arcade days, the game is developed from the ground up on PlayStation architecture. To port it to PC is quite intense, resource and time-wise. We don't have a whole lot of time at the moment, but it is something we are really interested in. Polygon even reported that the title had a chance of making it to the PS Vita, but this sadly wasn't the case. In addition to this, I noticed a very interesting quote from the aforementioned Gamers Database page. There's a brief passage here explaining that the game launched with a small roster that steadily expanded over time, and although this isn't anything out of the ordinary, the intention behind this decision speaks volumes. One of the major complaints that Tag 2 players had against the game was that the roster was simply way too large. Tekken has always been a very complicated series that requires you to master the attack ranges, lateral movement, and frame data of not only your character but also your opponents. Not knowing these will result in you losing to knowledge checks and things of that nature, and because you had to learn the frame data for all of these characters in competitive play, it was simply too much to ask. Gaming Database reports that Revolution's smaller roster was in direct response to Tag 2's criticism, as the developers wanted to avoid overwhelming new players, but did they succeed? Well, let's find out. Tekken Revolution features the same art style and general aesthetic of Tag 2, so you might think it'd just be a stripped back version of that game, but you'd be wrong. For starters, the classic Tekken button layout with 4 attacks makes a return, and you can use these to perform your fighting moves. All the iconic moves you'd expect to see in a Tekken game show up in Revolution, so you can jump right in and start going hard. To an extent. Okay, remember how Tekken 6 and Tag 2 had the bound system? For those unfamiliar, you could slam the enemy into the ground in the middle of your combo to extend it, and this led to extra damage and wall carry, sometimes to a ridiculous extent. For some reason, Revolution omits this system entirely, so staple Tag 2 combos like this no longer exist. Due to there being no way for me to try the game out, I swear dude, I can't figure this shit engine stuff out. I can't give my personal opinion regarding game feel, but the elimination of bounds harkens back to Tekken entries without combo extenders like Tekken 5 for example. To make up for this, 2 brand new system mechanics have been added to Tekken Revolution's gameplay formula. Critical arts, no, not you, are moves that have a chance of connecting as a critical hit, meaning they do more damage than usual, and special arts are invincible attacks. The former doesn't sound too bad outside of the obvious RNG involved, but special arts are where the problems start to arise. They're similar to power crushes in modern Tekken, but as their startup is fully invincible, you can just go wild with them. There are so many clips online of players spamming these moves to victory, and the counterplay doesn't seem too consistent. They are very unsafe on block, but let's be real, when has it ever stopped casual fighting game fans from using a big move? Invincible attacks that do big damage promote a more aggressive style of play, and I don't mean to give Namco any ideas, but I think it would be really funny if these moves showed up in a certain game in this series. But guess what, we're still not done, because the developers decided to include one more system to spice things up a bit. It's not enough to select your favorite fighter and use them to your heart's content, because you also have to level them up. Power increases your damage output, endurance increases your health, and vigor increases critical hits and rage. Starting at only 4, you earn more points by winning matches and ranking up, so this system, in theory, rewards skilled players. At first, this stat system sounds like a fun and a pretty unique way to personalize the gameplay of your main character, but you'll soon realize that there are 2 big problems with this mechanic. Firstly, it doesn't matter how skilled you are, because if someone puts all their stats into power, they'll be able to nuke you without even trying. And secondly, Tekken Revolution, just like any online game, fell victim to rampant hacking. It was very common to run into people with maxed out stats, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that it was impossible to defeat them. You may think something like Dark Souls, Devil May Cry 3, or Yoshi's Island had some tough boss fights, but nothing can prepare you for Tekken Revolution. You can be desperately chipping away at their multiple health bars, but even the slightest attack will send you to an early grave. Since every player's stats are publicly viewable, you can easily tell when someone was hacking, which I guess is nice, but I'm not sure if anyone was ever banned. There are even Game FAQs threads involving players who publicly boast about their hacks, and they would even offer their quote-unquote services to other players. I'm not sure why Namco decided to include a system like this into a game about competitive play like Tekken, but I assume that it was supposed to somehow help new players and casuals win more matches even if they hadn't mastered all the mechanics. You don't need to know optimized combos that involve specific wall carry distances or optimal punishes if your basic attacks do much more damage than usual, and even simple strings can be enough to close out a game sometimes. But these characters aren't just functions that purely serve as damage machines, so let's explore Revolution's roster for a bit. Not every classic Tekken character shows up here, surprisingly enough, and many of the really popular ones weren't even in the game on launch. Over the title's lifespan, more characters like Armor King, Nina, and Xiao Yu were added to the game, but you couldn't just select them right away. Character unlock requirements are a bit confusing to explain, especially because I can't test it out for myself, but as far as I understand, a virtual currency known as gift points were given to players for interacting with Revolution's modes. Beating arcade mode, logging in every day, and playing online were the most common ways for players to earn these gift points, and characters would unlock when you accumulated a certain amount of them, or at least that's how it was supposed to work. During my research, I found many active players confused as to how this system functioned, and it seems that unlocks were semi-randomized. The amount of gift points you needed to unlock characters would also increase as you kept playing, and this point requirement would often shoot into the hundreds of thousands. It also seems that players weren't sure of who was actually in the game to begin with, as despite Heihachi and Jinpachi acting as unplayable boss characters, some players believed that there must have been some secret way to unlock them, and others even tried to unlock characters who hadn't been included into the game yet. One player even reported that unlocks were different on separate accounts, and it means that this whole gift point system was very confusing for the average Tekken fan, myself included. And if all that wasn't enough to wrap your head around, get ready, because there's a whole lot more. Originally, I planned to focus on the game's modes and overall content in this section, but after getting lost in the rabbit hole that is Bandai Namco's monetization policies, I knew that I had to dedicate an entire section to them. Because Revolution is a free-to-play game, it's not as simple as queuing up in ranked and then playing until you crash out from special arts. No, dear viewer, life is never that simple. Instead, you had to invest in 4 virtual currencies. Let's break them down, shall we? Arcade Coins lets you play through arcade mode, and although you can only have up to 2 at a time, they replenish every hour. Battle Coins let you play online in either ranked or quick matches, and these replenish every 30 minutes. You can only have up to 5, so if you ever feel like playing at least 6 games in a row, you are out of luck. Premium tickets take the form of one of these, but they only go down if you lose. The idea behind these is that experienced players can keep playing if they go on win streaks, but as we established before, hackers can easily hoard these for themselves with invincible characters. Finally, premium coins are the same thing as premium tickets, but you have to buy them with real money. If you can understand all that, then well done, because I spent the better part of an afternoon trying to understand everything, it's so mad. And that's not even all there is to cover, because there are other monetary aspects of the game like daily login bonuses and paid lobbies. Yes, you heard that right. In order to create a lobby, you would have to spend real money on a premium season pass item. In case you couldn't tell, Tekken Revolution's monetization policy was as aggressive as Tekken 8 Season 2, and even though the developers boasted that anybody could play the game for free, in reality, it was more of a pay-to-play system. The reason given for this policy harkens back to the arcade days where you'd have to put money into the machine if you wanted to play, but I don't know if this works in the context of an online game, and I feel that it comes down to player expectations. Putting some coins into an arcade machine is part of the arcade experience, and development teams share an unspoken agreement with the consumer. You put money into our machine, we give you a fun time for a bit, and then we both move on. But with Tekken Revolution, users will be playing from home, and this environment lends itself to long and uninterrupted play sessions. Being gatekept from actually playing Revolution due to running out of a virtual resource is straight out of a mobile game, and I'm sure that Bandai Namco were hoping that whales, players who spend a crap ton of money in online games, would help keep the title afloat. Free-to-play games were still coming into their own during the 2010s, and unlike nowadays where they pretty much let you play for as long as you want, the genre's monetization policies back then were extremely blatant. A general rule of thumb regarding this game is that if there was something you wanted to do in the game itself, then it was most likely locked behind some form of paywall. I mean, it's nice that arcade coins and battle coins regenerate on their own, but it still sucks having to wait before you can play, especially if you wanted to play against the AI in arcade mode. Come on, you're not even playing against another person here, let us play it endlessly! After analyzing these systems for myself, I've come to the conclusion that this whole monetization policy is essentially a pay-to-win scheme, and I'm not the only one who thinks this way, more on that later. There are no winners here, and it comes down to how Revolution's monetization policies are intentionally designed. Think about it this way, playing Revolution is like being on a tightrope. You obviously don't want to fall off and have to pay to get back on again, so you'll do what you can to maintain balance. For newer players, this means you'll spam powerful moves in an attempt to brute force victory instead of properly learning the game's nuanced gameplay systems. For intermediate players who are still learning but have an idea of the basics, it's very easy to be knowledge checked by special arts and general Tekken shenanigans like 10-hit strings and things like that. So you're incentivized to focus more on character stat boosts over Tekken's core gameplay, and as the game launched without a training mode, you had no chance to practice in a safe environment. For the pros, there's even more stuff to learn how to deal with, especially on shoddy netcode, and again, as you couldn't initially practice, good luck figuring out punishes and movement related to frame data. I can't imagine anyone here is having fun knowing that a single loss online can cost them minutes of their life before they can play again, and that's not even mentioning a hacker coming along and destroying the tightrope for everyone. Losing all of your coins was bound to happen for players of all skill levels, and it meant that you either had to wait or pay up. Playing ranked in Tekken is already stressful, so I can only imagine how nerve-wracking it would be to suffer something like this.
This game is fucking stupid.
All Bandai Namco would have to do to make Revolution less stressful is to let users truly play for free, but then that could lead to less profits in the long term and the higher-ups might suffer losses and I don't know. The point is that I don't think any player of any skill level was satisfied with the title's monetization policies, and this left an unrepairable dent in Revolution's reputation forever. Upon release, Tekken Revolution was viewed by fans and critics as the start of a new era for the series, one that also promoted constant free updates and other forms of consumer-friendly practices. The content on offer was also— I'm kidding, everyone thought the game was mid. Revolution sits at a fat 70 on Metacritic, indicating mixed to positive reviews, and although you can definitely find glowing recommendations from outlets like PlayStation Magazine Australia, most publications didn't think Tekken Revolution was anything special. In an article from outlet VG247, Tekken Revolution was claimed to have been downloaded over 2 million times, and I can imagine that Bandai Namco would have looked at their golden goose and been pretty happy on the inside. I don't like to be too negative in my videos because I'm not a negative person, but this isn't the type of game where I can just break down feedback into positive and negative categories and then analyze them separately. Everything this game had to offer received both support and criticism from different types of Tekken fans, and it's quite interesting to see how groups of people perceive the same mechanics differently. The elephant in the room for most players was the free-to-play model, and this drove a wedge in between the player base. On one hand, plenty of casual fans and those not looking to spend much money on another full-price title were satisfied with playing the game in short bursts with friends, as they weren't trying to optimize their skills to a professional level. Instead, they just wanted to have some simple fun, and who doesn't like free stuff? Conversely, players concerned with a stable meta and competitive game balance weren't fans of this model, as it meant that if they didn't want to cough up some money, they would have to wait before being allowed to play again. If you're a die-hard fighting game fan, you'll definitely have experiences with hitting the lab for hours and then wanting to quickly find a ranked match, but if you were out of coins, you were also out of luck. This obviously promoted players to spend their money on microtransactions, and that's always a hard sell, especially coming from a series that was always known for being very feature-rich. Edge magazine even labeled Revolution as possessing an initially hostile, rich versus poor, and at times pay-to-win atmosphere, and similar sentiments from other reviews could also be found. Also, as a side note, the microtransactions were so egregious to the point where it made Edge mention class divide. They were that bad. After reading more reviews and online discussions, I've come to the realization that despite the free-to-play model having its fans, this group was vastly outnumbered by its detractors. An old thread from the game's launch period on the 8-Way Run website contains very negative reception from Tekken fans, with many users not only sharing Edge's pay-to-win sentiment, but also stating that in their personal view, Revolution was made for casuals who love to attack recklessly and don't really want to learn Tekken. When reviewers were analyzing the title in their write-ups, there's an often repeated word they all use that really caught my interest: experiment. As Revolution isn't a mainline entry, many review outlets perceived the game as an experiment of sorts that teased the potential future of the series, and they were kind of right. Mechanics like Tekken 7's Power Crush took heavy inspiration from special arts, and Eliza was even added to this game too. It may seem like Revolution doesn't have any major similarities with the series' more recent entries, but I think it does, at least when you look past a surface level. When reviewers mentioned that Revolution was an experiment, I assumed they were suggesting that Namco was experimenting with gameplay mechanics and payment models, but after putting on my conspiracy theorist tinfoil hat, I believe that this entire game was created to test out future monetization policies. To say that designing a virtual currency within a fighting game is hard work would be a massive understatement, and with how Revolution was free for everyone to play, I think the higher-ups at Bandai Namco wanted to use the title as a testing ground for microtransactions within their fighting games. Including these in a game like Tekken Tag 2 or the then in development Tekken 7 would have most likely led to major backlash, so releasing a safer title with no relevance to the mainline series was the best method of getting fans comfortable with the idea of paid add-on content. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but I find it to be no coincidence that a game like Tekken 7 suddenly had a bunch of paid DLC, even going as far as to break Harada's promises about returning characters, and Tekken 8 has a whole in-game shop and virtual economy for goodness sakes. I talk about this topic in more detail in my fighting game title updates video, so go check that out if you're interested. But when looking at Tekken Revolution specifically now, I view it as a hotbed of invasive monetization policies first and a fighting game second. To be fair, game development isn't cheap, and the developers obviously need to make a profit from their work, but the free-to-play model, which as I mentioned before was more of a pay-to-play model, left a sour taste in everyone's mouths. After Revolution was shut down for good in 2017, it kind of faded into obscurity. Aside from its soundtrack being available on streaming services, Revolution didn't have much of a long-term impact or legacy, and I'm not sure if anyone truly misses the title. Getting the game's training mode to run in an emulator is doable, but with how you needed to use a currency that was managed server-side to play against other people, I'm not sure if online play in an emulator or even on real hardware will ever happen again. Revolution was the last Tekken game before Heat, Rage Arts, Power Crushes, etc., so it sort of represents the end of an era, and as I think game preservation is very important, it sucks that there's no way to truly experience the game, warts and all. After doing all of that research, I never want to look at a microtransaction again. Just like Tekken Tag 2 Prologue and Tekken 3D Prime Edition, Tekken Revolution sticks out to me as one of the weirder entries into the series from the 2010s, and I wish it was easier to experience nowadays. The stat system was broken as hell, but it also heavily appeals to the part of my brain that likes really stupid stuff in fighting games, so I would have loved to have tried it out for myself. It's such a shame that the entire game is locked behind its always online nature, and now that I think about it, maybe it's not a stretch to say that Revolution is lost media? In the current era of fighting games, Bandai Namco never talks about Tekken Revolution for any reason anymore, and it's sort of like they're trying to sweep the game's existence under the rug and hope that we all forget about it. I'd be lying if I said that Revolution was a high point in Tekken's career, but I think it's as interesting as the mainline entries, and it was a blast putting on my detective cap and researching the title from beginning to end. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you very, very much for watching. I appreciate your time, and I hope you had fun. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.